sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do change. Change.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Spirit Cafe's show. I'm Barbara Jean.
I'm Mark Dupuis.
And I'm Cheryl Rogers.
And we are so grateful that you're here with us today. And I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. We are standing on the land now known as Toronto, and we stand with reverence committed to the sharing of this land. We acknowledge the genocide committed here, and we choose to courageously move along a new path, creating reconciliation. This land was stolen from the Anishinaabe. European settlers stole their culture, their language, their spirituality, and even their children. Today, Toronto is covered under Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties, and it is the traditional territory of many First People, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And still today, the First People are struggling to be seen and heard. Colonization has created a system of destruction to our First People and to the people forcibly brought here through the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. Toronto was built on stolen land, the stolen labor of Black, Indigenous, and racialized people. And in our desire to create reconciliation, we honor the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty and agree to peaceably share and care for this land and her people. We are committed to the active dismantling of the colonial system, and we are committed to the dismantling of all forms of racism. I invite you to take a moment to consider the land you're on and your commitment to reconciliation. Miigwech. Thank you.
And now it is my privilege to introduce you to our guest today, Andrew Facca. There's so much when I looked up information about Andrew that I didn't know where to start to tell you about him. But I chose this little piece that is at the top of his website, that from childhood, there existed this capacity for him to see in a flash the entire context of a business plan and how to execute it. He thought he was going to be a businessman for his entire life. He had over 100 employees, and he was on the brink of making a fortune when a series of dreams and epiphanies changed everything. In a lucid dream, he saw a message: heal others and you will heal yourself. But first, you must learn. These capacities are offered to serve those interested in fulfilling their potential. And I could go on and on, but I would like to welcome Andrew, and maybe he would tell us a little bit more about himself that he would like us to know. And our topic for today is going to be the courage to look within. It's never about what's going on out there. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello. Thank you. And it's wonderful to be here. And so we'll go with that intro.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. You know, I remember being asked to do a service for Unity Church in Cottonwood years ago, and the minister there was going out of town, and we got to know each other. So he asked, "Hey, would you be willing to do a talk when I'm away?" So I took the service, and again, it was extemporaneous. And I'm looking in the audience, and I'm like, and everybody there so Cottonwood's like a half hour from Sedona, and everybody there had gray hair. It was interesting. Everybody in the audience there, right? And it was like such a wonderful, loving group.
Yeah.
And when I was there, it was like I'd be hanging out in Sedona. This was years ago. I think this was like around 2011 and 2012. And um, I would love to hang out with Course in Miracles groups. And I, I mean, I was the youngest in the groups a lot of times, but I just loved going there. It was like this attractor field of people that have had the wisdom to um, just take ourselves lightly, take life lightly.
Mhm.
And I remember looking out at the audience. It wasn't quite clear what I was talking about. And I shared a story of when I was like asked to MC in a school play when I was in grade one. And I was in the auditorium, and I opened up the curtains and I stepped outside, and there were all the parents in the gymnasium floor. It was just like that. They're all looking at me and they're giggling, you know? And it's like I got like a speech to say here. And it was like I had to open up and speak. And um and so I did. But it was really interesting. It was that same consciousness
Oh
that was
dear.
there as a 6-year-old was talking to the group there at the church in Cottonwood. But you know what? There's a part of me that if I didn't look in the mirror and nobody told me how old I was, I wouldn't know. And I just saw everybody just like, shaking their heads, like nodding, like, wow, how'd that happen? To go from that little kid to having gray hair. But there's like a part of us that just, mm, to me, it's been like this contemplative life
Mhm.
right from the get go.
Mhm.
And the capacity to look within. And I would see things in context even as a kid. And it was really hard to communicate this because we communicate on a linear basis. And I would see underlying, and I would feel things, and I would see like a whole picture and stuff. So I remember sharing business plans when I was, with older people that used to own businesses when I was a teenager, and they weren't getting it, right? And I was like, okay, well. And so, as was mentioned, at a certain point in time, it was like, oh, okay, this capacity to tune into context exists for everyone, and it's not limited to business. So then I created the website healerman.com just to demonstrate what is possible, and I've been a one-man lab creating new potentials in consciousness-based healing and just
Mhm.
publishing everything that's possible. So if you went to the website healerman.com, you would see like all these live blood tests that we did, and we had a group of people, 10 people, and we had a live blood cell analyst take everyone's blood. And then we did a 3-hour group healing session, basically, where everyone received like a 15-minute session. And then we had the live blood cell analyst. Yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see um, the live blood cell. It's just, yeah, so you could just stop right
Mm.
there. So, for
Mm.
example, this was Jennifer on the left. This was Jennifer's uh, blood before. And she was told that she had inflammation, gallbladder issues, parasites, emotional issues, dehydration, liver issues. There was a lot.
Mm.
And then after the session, her blood was as perfect as can be. And the live blood cell analyst was in shock that this could happen. And so I published all 10 of the before and afters just to show what's possible. Because, I mean, if you went to a wellness center and you went with the issues on the left, they would probably put you on like some kind of intense wellness protocol. And if you could get those kind of results
Mm.
in like a year, it would be celebrated. And, we did that all very quickly just to show what's possible. So I've published tons and tons of studies on what is possible by connecting with the fields of consciousness that are available for everyone. So everything that has ever happened is available in consciousness, including all the healing. Like if we look at Jesus and all the great healing work he's done, thousands of years ago, that's always existed,
Mhm.
And so these healing fields exist, that potential exists, and there's nobody that has a patent on it. So what I love to share with, yeah, and there's all 10, and you can see the before and after. Some people had heavy metal before, and it was gone after, and you can see all these things that are possible. And so what I learned to do, let's say over the years, is um, whenever I'm called, let's say, to show up, and it's an arrangement. I just do my best to show up because there's so much that's going on behind the scenes. I just want to say, hey, what's the most we can do
Mhm.
to help whoever it is? Even when I was doing business, the only time I ever felt really good inside is when I felt I was actually serving someone,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
because of it. I remember, like, being on the brink of making a fortune, but going into a state of depression. And it was like, what is going on here? I
Mhm.
mean, I was programmed to believe that success leads to happiness, and deep inside, I was like, no, it's like something's missing here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, and then finally, I progressively got out of that depression. And I realized that the only times I was really feeling good was when I was in service. So I was like, oh man, this is for me, this is what it's about. Like, I feel
Mhm.
good when I serve,
Mhm.
and I know that I'm serving, and I'm
Mhm.
here for a reason, and to fulfill that potential. And
Mhm.
so that's great when you show up with people, and I publish everything on the site, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's mostly beneficial. I think
Mm.
I did a study of about 200 straight one-on-one sessions, and 95% of people reported, and this is just what they reported, the significant improvement or elimination of at least 3 undesirable conditions as a consequence of just one session. And so I just want to share that, hey, this is possible for anyone. There's
Mhm.
just nothing special about me. But
So,
I know there's a lot of work to do
mhm.
when I'm not showing up. And that's what I wanted to discuss today. It's like the courage to look within, because
Mhm.
this is where a lot of my own personal work has come from, and
Eh,
that helps me show up.
Yeah, and so one of the questions I was going to ask you is, because you say, it's anybody can do this. It already exists. It's already, we know that it's already in the field. We've just got to be able to tap into that and to claim it. So what would you say to somebody who asked you, well, then how would I do that for myself?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I've spent most of my time teaching others.
Mhm.
So wherever I've been doing it for 25 years. I usually assemble people in groups,
Mm.
and now I do it online. And I just demonstrate. And what ends up happening is that people end up benefiting by osmosis. At first, they might have a lot of questions, and then eventually it just becomes self-evident. And so, let's say we just start with, like, or I'm doing a retreat or something, where we're doing group healing sessions, and somebody's on a table, and I might start a session, and then people are watching, and I'm like, hey, just tune in to your own intuition. If you feel called to help, if you can kind of have some empathy for this person on the table and their condition, if there's something you want to do to help, just um, come on up and place your hands where you're being called to help. And just that intention to serve
Mhm.
somebody without wanting anything in return, the miraculous happens over and
Mhm.
over again. And then people experience it. And
And
so,
just quick question, when
yes,
you're doing a session or a group a
mhm,
group healing, or I'm not sure what you call it, are you
mhm,
praying? Are you saying something
sometimes.
to yourself, or
Sometimes. I mean, and those are all the things that I teach, because there's a lot. But
Mhm.
the main thing that I try to share is it's about connecting with the fields of consciousness where healing happens. So I've learned 1,000 modalities like a lot of other people have. And sometimes new modalities emerge on the spot. So I don't teach modalities. What I try to do is help anybody interested connect with the fields of consciousness where healing happens. So when we're feeling love, when we feel compassion, and compassion's sometimes a lot easier of a field to connect with than love.
Mhm.
We just feel compassion for somebody. You just want to do whatever you can to help. Um, yeah, and these are some of the things I'll share about like that picture there. It's like the different levels within us and how to connect. So there's all sorts of things that we can do, but mainly it's about connecting with the fields of consciousness that exist. And we could either do that temporarily, or perhaps we make like some kind of commitment in our life. I wish to be unconditionally loving at all times without exception. And then what's going to happen if we do that? The universe will challenge us. Oh, yeah, buddy. And then every annoying person in the world will be thrown in front of us. Oh, you want to be unconditionally loving, don't you?
That is such a fact.
Here's an opportunity.
You said, what? Here, let me test that. I love it.
So then that's where the word comes from within. It's like, damn, I thought I was unconditionally loving. No, I'm miserable. I'm enslaved, you know. And I was looking at Hawkins' scale of consciousness here, and it takes courage to look within, you know, because that ego's there for everybody, you know. And the value of having the courage to look within is that we can let go whatever's coming up at the moment. And I haven't found a way yet to avoid challenges in life. I mean, and it's like, wow. You know, for about 10 years, I was like hanging out in Sedona and I left the world behind kind of thing. And I was playing with butterflies. Really, it was the most peaceful time in my life. And, but, you know, but a lot of the work comes from like emerging in society. You know, if we want to live an ascetic life, yes, it can be challenging, but it can also be a lot easier. You know, most of our challenges in life comes from dealing with people in some way. So, yeah. So, but that's I just kind of feel for all of us. That's where a lot of personal growth and compassion can come from. And all the challenges, they either, you know, make us more bitter about life or give us a little bit more compassion. And if we have more compassion, then we find the influence on others may be greater. So this last year, I mean, I've definitely gotten more gray hair. I felt more stress than I ever have. Even my iridologist saw stress lines in my eyes. And then I started doing intense coffee enemas to get rid of them. And so they're half gone. And yet, people that have come for healing sessions, and there's more miraculous things happening now than ever. So even though my experience has been very challenging and very hard this last year, I mean, I just feel that it's even made me more compassionate for things that I didn't have compassion for before,
Absolutely.
and that actually has a beneficial influence on others.
Interesting how I've heard from so many people the challenges of the last year, and I know I've had a boatload of them, and at the same time, never been more joyous. I've never been happier, and I've never faced more really crazy stuff. But I got a phone call from my brother last night, and did some work with him because he's a guy. He works in the oil and gas industry in Alberta, and has been, you know, just a big burly guy doing his thing. But where he works, he brings the love. From the day he started there, he's like, I'm bringing love. I don't care what you people think. This is what I do. And so he's loving on everybody and doing this. He's been doing it for years and years and years. And it really has made a difference in the workplace, which is phenomenal. Saturday night, he's driving along the highway and sees somebody standing on the edge of the bridge on the wrong side of the barrier, getting ready to jump. And so he pulls his car over, phones 911, and runs over and starts talking to this guy to find out what's going on. And like a lot of people right now, there's depression and anxiety and feeling separate. And the guy goes, he's talking about, there's no love in the world, and people are mean to him, and there's just nothing worthwhile. And Perry looks at him and goes, "But I love you." And the guy goes, "You don't know me." He goes, "Doesn't matter. I love you." And he just keeps telling him that and telling him that and telling him that. Eventually, he talks the guy into stepping over the barrier. And then he grabs him and he gives him the biggest hug. And he said to me, it was the best hug he's ever received in his life. And this kid is crying his eyes out. And Perry goes, "I've got you, and I love you. You need to know I love you. You're safe." And he's holding on to him. And of course, the cops come up and they behave in a way that's questionable. But Perry was able to not only bring that man back from the brink, but also whoever was on the highway below that bridge, because it was heavy traffic at the time. And what's interesting to me is that there are people who will automatically do something very compassionate and kind and loving, and others who would just walk away. There was a lot of traffic on that bridge and people didn't pay attention to this man. But I look at that and I look at what the police officers were doing, because right away they were talking about tasing him and cuffing him, and my brother's holding the guy going, "Really? A taser? Come on. He's not doing anything," right? But I listen to that story and I'm thinking, if we can open our hearts past our place of ego or our place of, I've got to be first, that competitive, but rather to a place of acceptance that we're all connected. Every one of us. I said to Perry, I said, "He's your brother, like you're him, he's you. You live in one consciousness and you were there at the right time." And luckily, because I think if the cops had showed up, he might have jumped. But I look at that and my heart just opens up when I see people doing things that are so beyond the norm, like really stepping into a place that a lot of people wouldn't go. And the change that's made, not only in that young man's life, but even I think the police officers and stuff were a little bit surprised by my brother's behavior. But it's remarkable to hear about, and still makes me kind of emotional. But it's interesting how we can be more than what we think.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, God will send his angels to keep charge over thee. That's in Psalm 91.
Absolutely, always.
When I struggle, I was doing this just a couple of days ago. Like I was having a hard time getting out of bed, and I was like, had a hard time sleeping, and my mind is caught up on all these problems that somehow I created in my life, and I'm just praying Psalm 91, like, "He who dwells in the protection of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." And that we're all one. So I'm part of I'm not sure if you're familiar with William Tiller. He was a Stanford physicist. He actually grew up in Toronto and then spent the last 30 years in Arizona. And he created intention host devices that could actually host intentions and broadcast them. And he proved all these things scientifically that are just mind blowing. He was like, he was in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know?
Oh, yeah. Great.
And he became world famous after that. But anyways, I got to know Bill Tiller very well, and I'm on the board of directors of the Tiller Foundation. And I was just reading one of the science experiments the other day, and I just saw the reminder again where he's kind of building the science behind how this mind-blowing stuff works. Like this little box can hold an intention to, so they're he created these intention host devices, and 4 meditators are meditating an intention into the box. Let's say to change the pH of water, increase the pH of water by a point. And then the broadcast is sent out to labs throughout the US, a lab in the UK, a lab in Italy, and they're measuring water going up by exactly 1 point. just by broadcast. And it's mind blowing. So I mean, he's trying to explain how this happens. And one of the things he said is what Barbara just mentioned. And he said, basically all incoherence, all our problems, everything that brings illness into the body comes from our perception that we are separate.
Yes.
Mhm.
That's
Everything.
it. Everything.
So
I agree.
this is the main role of the healer. And this is why if somebody say, hey, what do you do? I'd say, well, it's spiritual healing.
Mhm.
The main role, and this is, and that's why I published it, just to show, because let's say somebody learns Reiki, that's just a methodology, and then effectiveness varies by person, intention, all these different things, right? And sometimes they can be very effective, but other times they can be ineffective, meaning somebody just does what they do, and then whether there's an improvement or not, it's like, oh, okay, come back next week if you want another session. We spent an hour together. And for me, I was like, well, if somebody's going to spend an hour with me, what's the most I can do? So I just wanted to see, hey, what's possible? What's the most we can do right now? Because I don't want to see people on a month-to-month basis. If I can only see a person once and make a major change, that's great. And I feel ultimately the most important role is to restore that connection that somehow we lost, that somehow the challenges in life have made us believe our perception that we are separate. So it's that reconnection. And just earlier this year, there was a woman that showed up, and it was like somebody reached out to me and said, hey, I was supposed to book this session with a lady, and they canceled. So, hey, do you have time to see her? And I said, sure. And it was like a spur of the moment thing. And she had like severe Hashimoto's. I don't know. People just write down what they're looking for help with. I just try to tune into what I can do. And again, it was just this restoration of that connection. And after the table, she's like, I'm healed. I don't know what happened. And she was feeling all the symptoms of Hashimoto's before. And she's like, I'm cured. I don't have Hashimoto's anymore. So it went from like an 8 to a 0. And then she showed up for a group healing retreat a month later. And she didn't wear her glasses or her contacts, and her eyes were blurry. And it was just like a random time in this 4-day event that I happened to walk by her. I wasn't even trying to do anything. And she said when I touched her shoulder, she felt like energy moving through her, and her eyes healed. And she went outside and she could see the fine detail on the leaves high in the tree. And so it was like amazing to see her connection. And she was glowing. That connection with allness was restored. She was influencing everybody. And so that's the main role. And it's almost like sometimes what happens during a group healing retreat, it's exactly like the experience that you just shared about your brother. Somebody is feeling so broken, and often life breaks us so much that we show up on a table, we've been praying to God, and we're like, oh, hell. And then these angels in human form show up, and the timing is just appropriate. Somebody feels called, you know what, I should really go to that healing retreat. And they feel called, and they show up, and they place their hands on them, and then something miraculous happens. It's like they feel love for the first time, like really love, when people they don't even know are just trying to help. And I've seen this over and over again. And it's that exact same thing. It's like that hug. It's like, wow, that's the best hug I've ever had. That's what happens. So it's almost like a live death experience where, because this is what happens with a lot of people that have near death experiences. Unfortunately, there's so many people reporting it. It's like, oh, I felt unconditionally loved for the first time, because life can be so challenging on this earth. So somehow we're getting right to the roots of how can we do the most to help somebody. And I just encourage people to show up, because I've just assembled regular people, and they do all this miraculous stuff. So we did a group healing session at Unity Church in Windsor in November, and I was just on a screen, and I had a few people that have been following my work for a long time, like my business partner Dave over at Lunga Vita, which is our retreat center it's a 16-acre lakefront retreat center, and we have 40 geodesic domes, and it's in Harrow, so just like half hour away from Windsor. And my business partner Dave runs everything there, and he does group healing retreats. And he was in the church with Natalie, who's a functional medicine practitioner, and they had their hands on a lady. And we had basically about 30 minutes to do a group healing session. So I was doing it live from Sedona. And I asked everybody to hold in mind 3 things they were looking for help with. And after that half-hour period, and it's live on YouTube, or it's filmed on YouTube, and anybody can see it. And then I asked, after this session happened, how many people experience the significant improvement or elimination of at least one condition as a consequence of being here? And like 80% of their people raised their hands. It was like a group healing on 80 people in 30 minutes.
That's amazing.
And most of them were hugging each other. I had people split into groups. Find somebody you don't know. And just in 1 minute, they looked into each other's eyes, felt compassion, and they were embracing each other.
That's beautiful.
You know, I think we're really getting to the keys of healing, that sometimes, you know, life is so hard that we feel so broken that we just want this hug from somebody that it just feels divine.
And it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So Andrew, I did watch that yesterday. So I did see that. It was quite amazing to see, you know, so many people just put up their hands, and really you had one person on the table with 2 people hands on. So would you call that spiritual healing, hands-on
100.
healing?
Yeah, it's all spiritual healing, basically.
It's
It's
energy,
the
right?
focus.
Energy healing.
No, it's not energy healing,
No?
because a lot of times people think of energy healing as I'm moving energy through somebody, and it's not about that. It's energy may move, like most people.
Yeah.
I would say probably 80% of people report all sorts of energy moving through their body. But what's happening is that the body's adapting itself, so we're letting things go. It's like when we're connecting with oneness, what we're often doing, and we could serve as catalysts to kind of bring in a higher field, let's say. And what ends up happening is everybody's resonating with that field. And then all of a sudden, the body's vibrating. The body's vibrating because it's adapting to a new field. And a lot of the physical ailments dissipate instantly. And so when people are feeling like the buzzing, the tingling, great. Just keep with it. Like sometimes the best thing to do is just like stay on a table. And this lady, apparently, I didn't know anything about her. And sometimes it comes to me So the other thing that happens with healing that I love doing things in silence, but sometimes I'm called to speak. So David Bohm, who was like an advanced theoretical physicist, he showed that whenever we bring into awareness something that we're unconscious of, if it's the root of an issue and we bring some light to the darkness, that in itself is spiritual healing, because it's coming from almost like we're living 2 levels of reality, and it's making the bridge, and that in itself is the impetus that leads to the change. All of a sudden, oh, I'm aligning with this truth. I've been asking for the truth to be revealed, and often it's things that people never think of. And so it just might, you know, somebody had like somebody came to me a couple months back, and they were experiencing all sorts of seizures. And then I just did a session over the phone, and I'm like, well, this started 5 years ago. And then I was describing what happened 5 years ago. And, you know, 5 years ago, his mom had passed, and that the whole family went into disarray, because it was like there were all these kids in the family. So there were all these influences, and you never know what it is, right? Because each person is different. And so with that lady on the table, something was being shared there, and Natalie and Dave were there, and they could feel things leaving her body, and she was a little bit in shock, and her life was changed there. So as far as they reported, even though I didn't have the time to talk to people one-on-one. So
Beautiful.
you
We
know,
need to take a little commercial break, and we'll be right back. And we got a whole lot more interesting conversation. So excited. You're watching the Spirit Cafe show. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Well, we're back. Well, this conversation has been remarkable. After talking to my brother last night, he was really struggling, just the what ifs, the what ifs. And so I asked him if he'd ever felt that way before. And he went back to something that happened when, I don't know, we were 6 or 7. And it was an accident that my grandfather caused by driving into the back of my dad's car. But in the moment when Perry was in the car, he thought Grandpa was actually going to run over my sister and I. And so he had this panic. And so when we were talking last night, he said, that's the feeling. So we went back and we did a little bit of clearing around that whole energy. So I haven't checked with him today to see how he's feeling, but hopefully a bit better. It's remarkable how trauma carries and how it impacts us. You know, we'll keep running something around in our mind and we need something to break the loop.
That's interesting, Barbara, how you made that connection, or excuse me, how your brother made that connection from somebody potentially jumping off a bridge to a childhood trauma. Like that did that take some digging to get to that?
No, because I asked him the question. I just said, when have you felt this feeling before? And he goes, well, I can't. I said, don't think about it. Let's just carry on our conversation. I don't want you to think. I just want spontaneous. And that's when he went, oh, I got it. And it was that intense fear of the what if. Nothing happened. You saved this guy. We weren't hurt. Like, so it's like the mind will fabricate all kinds of things. And what I love about David Hawkins' work is that, you know, he's taken us right back to consciousness, like pay attention. Like you were talking about the map of consciousness, and I'm feeling a bit anxious. Where am I on the map? Right. And I have one here on my desk as well. So it was wonderful when you were showing it. I'm going, I got that right here.
Yeah, I mean, I use it all the time. I carry mine with me. So, because it's like it takes courage to look at the lower levels of consciousness because what ends up happening often is, and especially if we spend lots of times with spiritual groups, I mean, it's great. We share the experiences of love, joy, and but often we're feeling something completely different.
Mhm.
And so I'd also mentioned that my father just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and he was kind of a pillar of a community here. He was a tile setter. He had worked really hard on his knees his whole life to support the family. My parents led a modest life, but he volunteered his time over at the Kubota Club, which is a big Italian club in Windsor, and he would go visit sick people in hospitals. He was like the president, vice president of the club. So he was 95, and 500 people showed up to his funeral to pay respects, and that
Yeah.
rarely ever happens, you know. And he had such an impact, and the priest that spoke at the service, he did such a great job, and he was saying, hey, he just did the best he could, you know. Let's just do the best he can. And he called him a saint and everything. But I know the last few years of my dad's life, that's not how he was feeling. He
Yeah.
was he was feeling like alone, miserable, like he was having like a hard time smiling. He had a great sense of humor. He had the courage to persevere, but he was alone a lot of times, you know. And it's almost like that guy that's about to jump. It's so much that he was like, "Oh man, I'm ready. Like take me out," you know.
Yeah.
And that you know, um, that you know, the world might perceive that, oh my God, look at all these great accomplishments. And he had like such a wonderful family, such a loving family, and it's all true. But like, what are we feeling on the inside, you know? And
Mhm.
so it really takes courage to, okay, well, what am I feeling on the inside? And so um,
And
it's,
to admit it.
yeah, and to admit it to ourselves. And this to me is the most courageous conversation, the one we have to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So when you said, what is, you know, this is, we're talking about courageous conversations, I'm like, okay, the courage to look within because it's that conversation with ourselves. Because a lot of times we're talking, it's like a monologue. We show up at a cafe and we're talking and we just want to be heard, you know? And a lot of times, I mean, I love the song Grand Illusion.
Mhm.
Uh, Welcome to the Grand Illusion. Come on in and see what's happening. Pay the price, get your tickets for the show. You know, the stage is set, the band starts playing. Suddenly your heart is pounding, wishing secretly you were the star. You know, and then it ends like deep inside, we're all the same. Like, don't pay attention to everything going on, right? And this is the reality we create. um, Life is extremely subjective. I had this dream that was like a lucid dream. I
Mhm.
don't know if I was traveling. It was in that awake, asleep thing right before you wake up. But I was seeing. I think it was my guardian angel who was right in front of me, and there was like a male and a female, and they were just smiling because I went to bed praying for guidance and praying for the truth to be revealed. And then it was just so apparent what was happening and those issues that I was having and the choices that I had to make. And they were like, well, make whatever choice you want. It was like so subjective. And then I would think, okay, well, if I make this choice, this is going to happen. They're like, well, okay, if that's what you believe, you know. And it was like this smiling, and it was like it was so profound to me
Yeah.
that regardless of what's going on out there,
Yeah.
what's going on in here, because that's going to determine what we're experiencing out there.
Yeah.
And so um, that's always the thing for me. It's like if something's seemingly falling apart, or I'm blaming somebody else or some other situation, and think about how easy that's been to do the last few years. I
Mm.
mean, to blame
Oh, wow.
organizations or people
Mhm.
that don't, because what ends up happening is that at the cafes, the Grand Illusion, it's like we're going to only attract people into our lives that support our views. And if somebody doesn't agree with us, well, we don't want to hang out with them. So then we attract all these circumstances
Mhm.
that support our view of reality,
Mhm.
right? And so it takes courage to say, well, what's really going on?
Mm.
And so that's why I love using the scale of consciousness. And then it's kind of like saying to me, like, get out of the BS, Andrew. You're not feeling loving right now. What are you feeling? Oh, okay. You know what? It's like I'm feeling enslaved. I mentioned this earlier. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
there were so many times this year I was feeling enslaved, and I'm like, okay, that's a state of desire. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's not love. We confuse love and desire all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then there's like a cravingness, and then the light view is disappointing, and the God view is denying. Oh my God! So we're in denial, and so I'm like, okay, so feel that, like
Mhm.
feel that energy, and then the letting go process is all about learning how to let that go by not running away from it and just feeling it. So sometimes it'll go on for days where I'm not trying. I'm just trying to feel that feeling and not run away from it.
Mhm.
And as uncomfortable as it is, just feel it. And then it's like, I mean, I thought I'd given up anger. I thought I conquered that like decades ago, right? And then, oh my God, anger's coming up. And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, get really angry. Fortunately, it only lasted a couple minutes, pound your fist on the desk or whatever. And,
Mhm.
it takes like a certain level of compassion for yourself to realize, okay, these are impersonal fields of consciousness,
Mhm.
and we all inherit an ego, and to not like kill ourselves over it. But this is the process. It's just
Mhm.
to feel it out because that energy field's limited. And then when
Mhm.
it's let out, all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, now we're out of victim mode. And now maybe we're feeling a little bit of courage. Oh, I remember I'm a spiritual being with a body. Oh, I remember this connection. Oh, hold on. Oh, finally I could see infinite potential. And I was just locking myself into my own little balls of reality and limitations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
So
so
that's
I
it
just,
in a nutshell.
yeah, for those people who don't know about David Hawkins' work, and that's where the map of consciousness comes from. There's two books that I know of. It's Power versus Force and Letting Go. And I know, Andrew, you mentioned Letting Go is one that you go to quite often. Can you talk a little bit more
Hmm.
about that? And because that's where this map of consciousness comes from and how you use it.
Hmm.
Like, I
Hmm.
know we have to sit
Yeah.
with the
So,
feeling,
I
but
mean,
then what do? You let go, or, and what do you replace it? What do you do with that?
yeah, and that's all the Yeah, and if people are interested in Dr. Hawkins' work, it's all published at veritaspub.com or
Mm-hmm.
veritaspub.com. And all his works are there. You could buy the map of consciousness there. But Letting Go is a great book. I've referred that to many people. I've bought the book for so many people because yeah, there it is. So it's an easy read, and you can buy these things on Amazon. You can listen to it or whatever. But the
Mm-hmm.
letting go process is really, really quite simple. And it's like, we can pay attention to whatever's a disaster in our life or whatever's going on that's like the source of stress. So I know when I interviewed Dr. Hawkins for the movie Voyage to Betterment, he came up with a line that was so powerful. He said, the narcissistic core of the ego is the source of all suffering, and its main goal is to be right and power over others. You know? And
Yep.
so think about how often we want to be right,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the last few years. Oh, they're going to challenge my view of this.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I'm very educated. Let me show you. And so what we're doing a lot of times is we're choosing to argue. And the smarter we are, the worse it is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, right? Because we at all times we have a choice of either being loving or, oh, let me prove to you that I'm right. Even almost let me force the truth down your throat, or what I
Mhm.
believe to be the truth,
Yeah, my truth.
and we're willing to even argue about that. So then it's like, okay, well, what's really going on? Oh, is that pride? you know, and so okay, life view is demanding. we demand that other people want to see things our way, and scorn, and what's the process? Inflation. We inflate ourselves like those birds that try to look really big for either protection or for mating purposes, So that's all like ego based. And I love the scale of consciousness, because we could say, oh, okay, that's what's going on. Because I've met tons of people that are loving people that can do amazing healing work because they really show up and are compassionate for others. But that's not the way we are all the time. If we could be loving or in a true state of peace for even like 5 minutes a day, it's so powerful that it can make up for a whole day of negativity. So often we deny all the lower states of consciousness that we're feeling. And what Hawkins showed was like, no, don't deny it. Go there, feel it out. It's a constant process.
Yeah, it's important not to resist what is.
Right.
Resistance is going to cause a lot of suffering, and that's usually where we go when we don't like something. We resist it. We want it to go away, and of course it won't.
100%. Yeah, it's that resistance,
Yeah.
And so, and in a lot of Dr. Hawkins' books, he writes what we're attracted to and what we're averted from. So I love the book Transcending the Levels of Consciousness. And, a lot of people go right to things like reason and how to transcend reason for love, which is all very, very useful. However, I'm not, it takes courage, and I'm not afraid to do that. Is okay, let me look at the lower levels of consciousness. What am I feeling there? And what do I have to transcend? So I'm looking at like the attraction of aversions to desire. And it's like, oh, there's an attraction to winning and an aversion to losing. Think about how common that is in society. So we gotta force ourselves to win at all costs. So a lot of times we're fighting against others. We're trying to win at their expense so that they lose. So what's that going to create?
Yeah.
So it's not a win-win situation. It creates instant karma. And so I'm like, oh, okay, this is the state of desire. It's like, and it's subtle, because for me, it's like, okay, the winning at all costs. It's like the expectations to be the best you can be and be successful and all these things. It's like, well, maybe the best thing you could do is just lose and fail, Andrew. And then all of a sudden, oh my God. Oh, the load's off. I don't have to save the world. God's got this.
Well, and what I want to ask you, Andrew, because I think it takes some work to get where you are. And the reason I'm saying that is because of my own experiences of, you talk about the courage to look within. We don't know what we don't know. And I think that what a lot of us have done, you talked about the illusion, is we live in that illusion, and we think we know who we are. We think we know how we'll react to something. And I don't believe we do until we actually do start doing that inner work and doing that courageous work and being honest with ourselves. And so for me, there's a small example of an exercise I did in a shadow workshop. And it was, looking at just some of the things that I did as a mother and a wife, that I said that I meant well, and I really believed. And then I'm like, oh my God, but I wasn't in my lane. I was in somebody else's lane. Right? And so, but how many of us can actually get there without doing the work?
Right. And the shadow work is so important. I mean, that was like the work of Carl Jung. And he said, well, hey, we don't become enlightened by like, floating in the light. It's like it takes courage to look at the darkness and make the darkness conscious, in essence. So, and shadow work, it's very important, because this is the reality. Again, this is common to humanity. So it takes a fair level of compassion for ourselves and others before doing shadow work to look at trauma. So there's like a process, because you can't force it, and you can't force it on others, because it just might be too much for people to handle, because a lot of traumas are either suppressed or repressed or denied. And probably about 25% of people are dealing with severe traumas that have almost led to like some kind of mental instability. And so this is the reality of what's going on out there, you know? And so yes, it takes courage and it takes process, but I love the book Letting Go Again, because it just walks us through that process, and it's a good start. And once we become aware of that process, then when we're in it again, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. This is like a temporary period of anguish that I just have to get through. But there's a reward when I'm on the other side, and we're all doing this at all times in our life. Everybody's doing this. We face all these challenges in life, and until it gets us so low that we're willing to transcend and let it go. But when we're on the other side, we're grateful for the experience.
Yes.
Right.
So a lot of people have experienced that when they've hit rock bottom. And I did it in my life when I hit rock bottom, and then I was saved by amazing grace. There was nothing else that saved me, and it was, oh my God, I finally understood the meaning of the words amazing grace.
Yeah.
You know, that
Where-
saved a wretch like me.
Yeah.
I once was lost, but now I'm found.
Now I'm
I
found.
was blind, but now I see.
We've only got about 3.5 minutes left. What is one thing you'd like people to take away? Most important thing people could take away from this.
You know, it's really funny. When I interviewed Dr. Hawkins back in 2007 for the movie Voyage to Betterment, he's the only person I met in my whole life that actually gave up anxiety, because he didn't think. He has no thoughts. He just shows up and he's present. And so he's written about the scale of consciousness in every one of his books, right?
Yeah.
So my first question to him, and I'm sitting there right in front of him, is, hey, can you describe the scale of consciousness? He says, oh, I've forgotten all that already. And I was like, I had like a whole bunch of other questions to ask after that, right? And he was just so present. And he's just looking at me and smiling. And then I think he saw the look of panic on my face. and then all of a sudden he started speaking. He just shows up, and something energized him, and he described the scale of consciousness perfect. So in the movie Voyage to Betterment, while he's talking about the scale of consciousness, we've got videos of what he's talking about to demonstrate that, you know. And right at the end, you know, my final question was, hey, do you have anything you want to share with humanity? And he looked at me and he said, no.
Nope. I love that.
That is beautiful, I must say. That's the best thing I've heard all day, I think.
It's such an important thing, you know, just to be present, be with what is. Wow, I love it.
Yeah.
This has been remarkable.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you. This has really been an enlightening conversation, shall we say.
Wonderful.
Mark, do you have any final thoughts? We've got about 1.5 minutes.
I loved what Andrew said early on. What is the most we can do with our time together? I think going into any space thinking that what is the most we can do with our time together, I'll take that away.
That's beautiful. Cheryl?
I agree. I just wanted to share, I don't know if Andrew saw, Osteopathy and Healing Center is here. And they said in the chat, thanks for showing up, Andrew, after the passing of your father. That takes courage to show up. It brings courage to me. Sending you lots of love.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here. This has been a fabulous hour. We'll have to have you back.
Absolutely.
And for everybody watching, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back again next week. Bye for now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
God bless.
Bye.
God bless.